2025. Now, Speaker, this morning I was actually at a business breakfast. It was held by Business Northern Beaches, and as I sat down, I saw, which I have here actually, the invitation for the next meeting that they were holding, which was entitled Unlock the Power of AI, Understanding AI in the Context of Running Your Business. And I thought it was a very apt day to be looking at that invitation for the next event, and also knowing that today that we would be debating this legislation. I am conscious that this legislation will put duties and also potentially significant financial pressures on small and medium-sized businesses in particular. Now, of course, everyone, including small and medium-sized businesses, want to have workplaces that are safe and want to maintain that safety in the workplace, even as we have the emergence of AI and other technologies that will increase productivity and help our businesses as well. But I consider the current system that we have and the current legislation we have and the current work health and safety laws to be sufficient to be able to balance the safety of workers, but also to allow businesses, small business and medium-sized business and large business, to embrace AI technology, to embrace productivity measures, and to be able to do so without thinking that they are at risk and being hampered by legislation which I consider at this stage to be overreach and to be fixing problems that aren't necessarily needed to be fixed through the legislation we see today. Other members have mentioned, and I think it's important to mention, that I have met with a lot of industry groups that have been mentioned today, and received also the letters of industry groups that have come together against this legislation. And one of the key things that stuck out for me as I considered it was that we do have a national system, and the Australian Safe Work Australia and model laws that are intended to create harmony across the states and territories when it comes to workplace laws. And that process hasn't been followed in this instance, and as a result we have New South Wales moving before other states and territories to go into the area of managing risks associated with AI and at the same time providing overreach in terms of the access that a union official would be able to have. When I considered the legislation, I thought of two things really. So first, the insertion of section 21A, duties of a person conducting businesses or undertakings involving digital work systems. And when I reflected on those duties, I thought, well, maybe it's reasonable to have these duties inserted and then not to have section 118 and 118 subsection 2 and 2A. So my thinking was, okay, have the duty and have the duty there, but not necessarily give the rights to a union official to come in and to go into a business, particularly a small and medium-sized business who may not have the resources to cope, or to have access to systems and code and algorithms that may have intellectual property implications, and to ensure that the duty happens but not necessarily have the overreach of the union official being able to access those systems. But then I also reflected on what it meant for small and medium-sized business to actually have those duties. And I note yesterday that in the digest that was provided in relation to this legislation and other legislation, that there was commentary around the implication for breaches, and the breaches of these duties start at 149,000 or thereabouts for breaches. And again, sitting at this breakfast this morning with small and medium-sized businesses, listening to their struggles, listening to the layers of red tape, to the issues that they're facing in terms of increased costs, and also competing with not only other jurisdictions but also internationally, when some businesses were telling me how they've lost business to offshore businesses, where clients have moved to offshore businesses instead of their own. And I think when we're thinking about all that, we really need to be thinking about how we support businesses and support their productivity. AI has incredible opportunities to revolutionise businesses in New South Wales, and I know other members have mentioned that 6,200 foreclosures in the last 12 months. And I think we actually are getting ahead of ourselves with the legislation we're speaking of today. The reason for that is we want businesses to embrace technology. We want them to embrace AI. We want to have our productivity gains. And I looked at a couple of recent either submissions or reports from the Productivity Commission. And one of the recent ones, I think it was from 2024, and the submission was for the Senate Select Committee on Adopting Artificial Intelligence by the Productivity Commission. And one of the points that they made was that regulation should enable AI adoption and not stifle it. And obviously this is coming from the Productivity Commission at a federal level and considering Australia as a whole. And in that, recognise that AI has the potential to transform our economy and GDP by up to 5% uplift by 2030, which is huge. I don't think we can ignore that AI has those opportunities, and I think it was an AFR article actually where federal Labor conceded that their approach to AI would be to not stifle it and to not get in the way with further red tape. That said, we need to have the checks and balances, and that's where I think this legislation is premature, and the proper process would be to consult with businesses of all sizes. And I've got to say, the businesses this morning had no idea about this legislation, the ones that I was talking to. So the time needs to be taken to consult with them, and the analysis of how we need to amend our laws should actually be taking guidance from WorkSafe Australia and the work that's done on the model work health and safety laws. And from that point, we in New South Wales should be considering how we then address gaps or issues that are arising. I have to mention as well that I have a lot of people contacting me in my electorate with small businesses facing issue after issue, and I haven't had anyone contact me regarding issues and concerns around pressures that may be associated with AI and systems, although I completely acknowledge that they would exist. But they do have concerns about union overreach as well. So the final thing I'll mention, and other members have also mentioned it as well, is I do know the pressures of having a small business. It was probably about 10 years ago when, like others who have explained, surviving in their small business, trying to meet the regulatory requirements or even understand what they were was a huge issue, as well as different costs. And I remember having to share a warehouse in Warriewood and carry boxes while heavily pregnant, being everything from my own accountant to lawyer to salesperson to updating the website, and honestly even getting across all the requirements for even paying employees was a big task. And so I know in the context of New South Wales wanting to embrace productivity, wanting to support our small and medium-sized businesses, I think we have sufficient protections in the current work health and safety legislation that we have before us. And in relation to the bill that's before the House at the moment, I think it's premature and hasn't followed the correct process in terms of addressing how we should be having reform in this area. And for that reason, I won't be supporting the bill. Thank you.